studying for the GAMSAT is a lot easier if you know what it's really testing. Now, in my opinion, the primary goal of the GAMSAT is to identify people who it thinks are likely to succeed at med school. And why I say this is if you think about a university, they get all of their funding based on how many people graduate as doctors. Now, universities are a business and they're trying to make as much money as possible. So why would they be using the GAMSAT as some kind of entry criteria if it wasn't good at predicting if someone's going to pass medical school or not? And just to add some more evidence to this, in my own personal experience, I found that a lot of the skills that I developed during my GAMSAT study have actually helped me during the degree as well. Now, in today's video, I'm going to share what I think are the important skills to do well at medical school and relate it to questions that I've seen in the GAMSAT. So the first thing that I'd like to discuss is being able to understand large amounts of complex information really quickly. So I'm sure you've seen this in a lot of GAMSAT questions, but I was actually looking through one of the the new online ACER practice test recently, and I saw a picture of a Wiggers diagram. Now, this is basically just a diagram showing how the pressure and volume changes in one of the chambers of the heart during the cardiac cycle. And I thought this is exactly what we learn in our cardiovascular block. And when you think about it, it makes complete sense. If you can look at a question and understand that diagram, that's going to suggest that you can go into medical school and be given some kind of really complicated diagram or explanation in physiology and actually draw meaning from it and understand it. And because I spend quite a lot of my time looking through the ACER practice material, as I go through med school, I actually see more and more of the concepts that we're learning as content for questions in the ACER material. So I think there's a lot of value in practicing how you approach these large texts of complex information. So I think you really need to be able to identify the core concepts and simplify them in such a way that you genuinely understand them and then can demonstrate your understanding. Because if you think about it, that's exactly what you're going to need to do every week at med school. So secondly is the ability to draw conclusions. Now, I think that this is particularly relevant for clinical reasoning, where you're often given a lot of information and sometimes conflicting information. So you really need to find out what's causing whatever thing you're trying to figure out and what might be noise or caused by the actual thing that's going on. So a kind of simple example that I was thinking of is maybe if someone had chest pain and a high heart rate, you kind of need to be able to identify, is the high heart rate causing the chest pain, so something like an arrhythmia potentially, or is there actually something else going on, like a heart attack, for example, and the high heart rate is a compensatory response because the heart is failing? I think being able to integrate multiple sources of information and identify what's actually going on and what might actually be caused by something else or just completely irrelevant is a really important skill for clinical reasoning. And I'm sure that you've seen questions in the GAMSAT that ask you to evaluate a bunch of different arguments and kind of integrate information. And lastly is recognizing bias. So obviously everyone has inherent biases, and that's really actually quite an important thing because it helps you make judgments, which I just discussed was a really important part of clinical reasoning. However, our biases can also cloud our decision making, so it's really important that we have the ability to learn from our mistakes and recognizing when we might be falling for a cognitive bias. And there are so many of these cognitive bias traps in the GAMSAT. And I think if you're able to study the mistakes that you've made on the practice material and come up with strategies to not fall for these mistakes, that's a sign of someone who's going to be very good in a medical degree. Because medicine is incredibly humbling. You're constantly making mistakes, even at a preclinical level. And I only know that that's going to increase the more and more I progress. And I think it's really important to be able to learn from those mistakes and grow. And even just besides learning from your mistakes, identifying situations where you're likely to make a mistake and ask for help. Because really, that's what the whole medical degree is there for, is to graduate people who are going to be safe intern doctors and ask for help when they need to. If you want to learn more about cognitive biases in the GAMSAT, I'll link my video that I made on them here. But otherwise, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.